Hello, welcome back to the podcast. For those of you just tuning in, I am Adrian Bars and I am joined by...
Hello, my name is Anthony Herrera.
Hello, I'm Evan Connor.
Hello, my name is Robert Rodriguez.
So before we get into the actual conversation or topic, first we will start off with some intro information. So the death penalty was first used in present-day U.S. in Jamestown in 1608, and later in 1790, the first U.S. federal execution occurred. And then the first federally executed woman was in 1865. Her name was Mary Surratt. And then there have been a bunch of... This controversy has gone down in history many times, in many cases, seen in Furman v. Georgia, when the states decided that the death penalty was unconstitutional in 1972. But then the Supreme Court allowed states to continue with it with the case Gregg v. Georgia in 1976. So before we continue this conversation, I just want to take a poll on who here is against and who here is for. So me personally, I am against the death penalty. Anyone else?
I am also against the death penalty.
So does that mean you two are for?
Yeah, no, definitely. I am actually for the death penalty. I feel there's ways that we need it, and I just feel it's situational. You know, we should actually take the time rather than just canceling it out in general.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I just feel like it kind of depends on the situation, and I feel like it kind of depends more on the judicial system and basically the court system. Okay,
I can see that. You said when it is necessary. When is the death penalty necessary?
And what I mean by that is basically if your child, for example, got murdered, or if a family member got murdered, I feel like you would want some sort of revenge, and I feel like it's a natural instinct for everyone to want some sort of revenge in this type of scenario.
Yeah, going off on Robert's point, I definitely believe that people have a natural urge to do something in response to their loved one dying. And I feel like the death penalty is just a good way to punish those who have taken lives in this world.
But don't you believe that just facing the time in prison itself is good enough punishment?
I believe it's a good enough punishment in some occasions, but in certain situations where a sane person, they've been evidently sane, and they've made it a point, or they've shown desire to kill someone, I feel like they deserve a punishment that's worse than time in prison.
Okay, so that's actually something interesting to point out. Evan, you said a sane person committing that sort of action results in you thinking that a family would have to, it's necessary for them to receive the death penalty. But Robert mentioned earlier that crazy, for lack of better terms, I think we should use mentally ill, but for mentally ill people to do the same sort of actions. So does that mean that you guys think that someone who's mentally ill shouldn't receive help instead of being put for the death penalty? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's why I really think this conversation is situational, because as I was saying, I believe it's only right for sane people to be punished like that. I feel like we should give the right help to the right people if they truly show that they need it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I feel that in the judicial system, a lot of lawyers tend to talk with their clients, and while talking to their clients, they can possibly lie and plead insanity. And I kind of think that brings up the point of if they're lying or not.
At the same time, yeah, someone can plead insanity and they can't lie, but you can look at past records to see if someone with mental illness actually received help for mental illness, because someone could lie, but at the same time, you could see if they actually lied.
Well, yes, but then who's to say that they didn't snap at that moment?
But if they did snap at that moment, then wouldn't that make them eligible to receive mental help?
Yeah, no, I feel like people can lie, anyways. They don't have to, prove it. If they were normal before, if they were, mentally good, right? And then out of nowhere, they plead insanity, they could be lying, and there's no real way to prove it.
But that's why I brought up the fact that you can look at their records beforehand, because if they don't have any records, it's not to say that you can't go crazy, but you can also have people in your family tell you how they acted beforehand, how if they had any triggers or something like that, if they acted weird.
Yeah, I guess that the witness thing could help, because during the trial they call witnesses to see how you were acting, right? So I guess that's one way to prove it. But going back to my point, I feel like the situational thing, I truly believe that only cases with certain hard evidence and no proof of insanity. Like, they actually were desiring to end someone's life. I feel like they should be put to death.
But you say hard evidence like that's something easy to come by. Hard evidence. How are you gonna get hard evidence on someone's actions, on someone like how someone like thought? Like, because you can't get hard evidence on someone's train of thought and what led them to do that action.
See, that's a good point, but my point is hard evidence is found in many cases, like school shootings or acts of terrorism, things like that, where it's like someone actually made it a point, like they made it a point where they wanted to kill either someone or a lot of people, and they just had hatred in their heart when they did this. And I feel like acts of terrorism and also school shootings and mass shootings are largely displayed on news channels and things like that. Like usually they would have live coverage of situations like that, and that's what I'm talking about, hard evidence. But then again, thinking back on your point, you said you can't really tell hard evidence in like the realm of thought, right? So you can't really know if they were either I wouldn't say like mentally unstable beforehand, or if they randomly just became mentally unstable, because there's no definite way to choose or to find out if someone was either pretending to plead insane or just actually needs help physically. So yeah, I feel it's a very situational topic.
We just got a new submission for a new question right now. The question is, which is cheaper, the killing someone off through the death penalty or keeping them incarcerated? So before we look into this, what do you guys think? Like, logically?
I personally think that it would make more sense. It would be cheaper to keep someone incarcerated, because the death penalty, like the methods of execution, everything that I know, there's a list we can go by. Can I run by the list real quick?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So from what I've seen, the most common executions are lethal injection, electrocution, lethal gas, hanging, and firing squad. And for me, I think it makes more sense, and it's going to be way cheaper just to keep someone incarcerated, because that's something that the government is used to doing, and something that's pretty like common in the justice system. And having these sort of methods, they can really prove expensive way of dealing with someone.
Personally, just without any research, my opinion is that putting someone to death would actually be cheaper. Just like thinking about this logically, I feel like if you keep them in prisons for so long, you always have to be feeding them, and you just have to make the prison bigger, because if you put them on death row, it's kind of like a one and done thing, versus keeping them in prisons. You know, you have to just make it larger, you have to pay for all the food, you have to pay for the facilities in it. And yeah, I just feel like putting certain criminals to death would be a cheaper and easier way of dealing with those kind of people.
So you think the maintenance is like pricey?
Yeah, I definitely believe that.
Okay. What about you, Robert?
Yeah, I also definitely agree with Evan. I think that by putting them through death row, it would be a quicker process, and by keeping them in the prison, it's way more costly, I guess, because you keep them there for a very long time.
But yeah, that's just our side of the opinion, right? We definitely think holding them incarcerated in a prison is more costly than just putting them on death row.
So before I haven't looked at the statistics yet. I haven't pulled up, but I haven't looked at them. But before I really look into them, off what I think, like off my knowledge, I believe that it would be cheaper to keep them incarcerated, because I feel like, considering that prison conditions right now aren't that, they're not good, they're not like really like pristine or anything, they're like the very bare minimum. So I'm pretty sure it's like cheaper to keep them incarcerated than actually spending the money to have them executed. But okay, so now looking into these statistics, it says that the study counted death penalty case caused through to execution and found that the median death penalty case cost 1.26 million. Non-death penalty cases were counted through to the end of incarceration and were found to have a median cost of 740,000. So yeah, it is, if anything, it says in another article, it says it turns out that it's actually cheaper to imprison someone for life than to execute them. In fact, it is almost 10 times cheaper. So what do you guys think about that?
That's actually against what I had thought. I find that actually surprising though, because I feel like just like, you know, killing someone shouldn't cost that much, right? Like, how much does the actual like killing part cost?
Okay, so after hearing Adrian's information, I did a little bit of research. So I found that the lethal injection is the most popular by a lot, because after the initial court case, Supreme Court case, Gregg versus Georgia, in 1976, I found that the lethal injection is more popular by almost 1,000 in each state that is allowed by it, and the lethal injection itself is $90, but for the entire case, for the entire execution, it cost nearly $1 million.
All right, so yeah, I mean, I would assume that the actual killing part would be cheap, but I feel like the court case costs way too much.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I feel like, yeah, so maybe it's just definitely the court system, and we're putting way too much time and attention into that instead of the actual executions.
Yeah, but even with the costs and all of this, I still believe truly that if someone has done something really wrong, i.e. terrorism or mass murder, they still deserve to be put up for execution.
But why though?
What do you mean?
Like why do we get to choose? Why do we get to like play God? Like choose when someone dies? Like how does that make us any better than them?
Well, morally, I feel like if you yourself have taken more than one life, and you were, like, at least somewhere mentally in the situation, like you were aware of yourself, and you actually went out and did it, you truly deserve to just have your life taken. Like, you chose to take others' lives, so you should have yours taken as well.
But just because someone takes someone else's life, how does that give us the right to take their life? Like, at what point can we say that, oh, it's okay to take someone's life? Just because they have taken other people's life doesn't mean that we have to do the same things then.
Well, I feel like death is truly the worst punishment you can give someone. Just their life being taken. I feel like that's worse than any amount of like living you give them.
But you have to bring up the point. If someone is like doing an action like that, that could be like the very last action that they want. Like, let's say they break, that could be the very last action that they do, and us executing them, that could be what they want. That's not them serving what they like have done. That's not them receiving the punishment that they deserve.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're saying that they might be happy that they're put to death?
I think they, well, maybe not happy, but I think that's what they would want, because at the end of the day, they're not going to receive any of the punishment. They're not going to pay for what they did.
They're not going to go through like the time that they deserve. Like, yeah.
So you guys think that they should just live out the rest of their lives isolated and by themselves?
Yeah, practically. I don't know if I completely isolated, but I'd say giving them, I wouldn't say the satisfaction, but just like ending like their lives is kind of like, they're not fully suffering the time that they deserve. It's just cutting short.
Oh, I see.
And then again, to like reiterate, like on what basis is this like overall even right? Like, are we like bringing this up to par like as to human logic and what we think is best, like the best punishment, or are we like taking it up to the Constitution?
I think the part about human logic can be said about the families, because although we can take into account the families of those who have recently received that devastation, we can't really put all the responsibility in the eyes of the families. We have to look at the Constitution, and we have to realize that as people of this community, like, the death penalty is unconstitutional. As it says in the Constitution, the death penalty violates the right to life, which happens to be the most basic right of all human rights. It also violates the right not to be subjected to torture and other cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment.
Okay, so by that same token, it's like it brings back the question: on what basis is this like good, or like should we keep this? Because it's already unconstitutional. So on what basis is this right?
It depends on where you look. Truly, if morally in your heart you're siding with the parents and the family, which in this case I am, definitely, you would base it on that. But as we are U.S. citizens, we have to abide by the Constitution. But even with the Constitution, the death penalty isn't really specifically stated. Therefore, it is a state's right. Like, as of now, multiple states do have the death penalty instated, and it's been instated for quite a while now. Like, there's been, I think, thousands of confirmed death row cases.
So you're going for that more loose belief in the Constitution, where if it's not directly stated, like it's fine.
Yeah, definitely the loose constitutional, kind of thought where it's a state's right instead of, because it's not directly written in the Constitution that people should not be put to death based on their crime. It just says cruel and unusual punishment.
But don't you think, like, hanging and like all the different forms of execution is cruel?
Definitely, I believe that some of them are a little bit over the top because there are some ways of execution that the United States has used in the past, like firing squads, I believe hangings, and I think gassings even. Those are definitely violations of the said cruel and unusual punishment in the Constitution. But lethal injection, that's pretty much a swift death, I would say, for these heartless criminals that have been proven to just, either take multiple lives at the same time, do acts of terrorism against the U.S., things like that.
Yeah.
But you're talking about, what you're going for is that you're talking about the methods of execution and what's like cruel when it comes to the method, but is the execution itself not cruel?
The execution itself, I mean, it's not, I feel like it doesn't directly constitute as the cruel said in the Constitution, but it's bad enough to provide the best punishment for those types of people.
Because then it begs the question, if we're talking about the executions, let's say if something's cruel like a murder, that's cruel. But if we are like the government, how is like an execution, the murder, how is that not cruel? The government is using its power to do the same thing that a criminal has done, but it can go without saying that it's cruel.
Oh, so you're putting it in a way where it's like the people versus the government, and that the government like have the right to kill, but not the people?
Yeah, that's a good point there.
I believe as the people, we can really change the government and their ways based on our beliefs.
Yeah, okay, now bringing it back to beliefs, sort of like a full circle, where do you guys stand now, like after this whole sort of debate or had this conversation, where do you guys stand?
Now seeing all your points, I definitely am on the side of against death row executions. Don't get me wrong though, I still believe that like morally or some aspect of like death row is kind of good, but from what I heard and the valid points that Adrian and Anthony said, I definitely think that instead of death row, we should have better like reformation of like the prison, like to help the prisoners instead of just killing them, and basically allowing them to change, and maybe like a better government system.
Yeah, so for my belief, originally I was definitely pro death row executions. Like I really believed that based on the victims' families and things like that, these ruthless killers should be put to death. But with the point of it being unconstitutional and things like that, we are still U.S. citizens and we must abide to the Constitution. And it states in the Constitution that everyone has a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So taking these, what I would think, heartless killers' lives is still against the U.S. law. So that point, combined with the cost, you said millions, and the fact that the responsibility would be put on the family and the victim's family, I definitely changed my perspective and my belief. I now believe that the U.S. should not condone any death row executions.
As for my beliefs, obviously I'm going to be on the same side, but I did want to point out that I do agree with Robert's solution. I do think that we should focus more on the reformation of the criminals instead of putting them on death row, because I already thought that it wasn't constitutional, but I do like Robert's way of thinking and helping the criminals.
Yeah, I also agree with the whole reformation approach towards prisoners and just prisons, instead of using the death penalty, like try to reform. But yeah, it's just I still stand on the side that I began with, like against the abolition of the death penalty and now the new solution of reformation.
So yeah, if any of you of our loyal listeners want to make a change in your state communities, local communities, even federal change, we do encourage you to speak out based on your beliefs. We obviously promote the idea of changing the death penalty and choosing a more anti-death row execution approach. So yeah, definitely reach out to your government, local or state or federal, and just advocate for the abolishment of death row executions.
Thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you guys next time.
Bye.